Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Tim with the NT Collectibles, and today I've got a good one for you. You guys like the retro formats? I know you do. I've seen what you guys like to watch, and I've got a good one for you today. Got an Edison deck profile. This is the Machina deck, and I am pretty certain that you're going to really enjoy this profile, and we'll talk a little bit about how the deck functions. As well as some of the reasons for certain cards, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun, so let's do it. All right, let's get right into it. So, 3 copies of Machina Gear Frame, 3 copies of Machina Fortress, and 3 copies of Machina Force. I think that's pretty standard, but that's the end of the Machina package. Now for the Lightsworn package. 3 Raikou, one of the best cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! At this time, and 1 Lila. And then for the monsters that are non-Lightsworn or Machina, and I think that I have a bit of a unique lineup of these, but we'll start with Caius, one of the most powerful cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! At this time, Gorz, the Emissary of Darkness, and then Card Trooper and Scrap Recycler. I know you're like, that's not unstandard, but this is. I'm playing 1 copy of Plague Spreader and 1 copy of Debris Dragon. This deck shuffles a lot of stuff back in the deck, but it also mills an awful lot. And so I felt like as I was playing, like, wouldn't it be nice to be able to take advantage of that? And these 2 cards help you do that. Debris Dragon can bring back Card Trooper, as you know, mill 3, and make a Black Rose Dragon. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And then Plague Spreader gives you access to cards like, Colossal Fighter, Stardust Dragon, Goyo Guardian, just several different options that are out there, as well as even Armory Arm and things like that. So I thought this deck could use that extra punch that most lists don't have, and I felt like adding these was just so simple and didn't really change the way that the deck plays as a whole. They've been wildly successful in the deck as well, I'll add. And then let's go to the spells. So, 3 Book of Moon, 3 Pot of Avarice, and then 5 one-ofs, Creature Swap, the Limited Charge, the Limited MST, the Limited Heavy Storm, and the Limited Brain Control. So, obviously, this is pretty standard as a whole. This is a bit of a tech that not a lot of people are doing. And then I want to kind of explain why Book of Moon's so good in this deck. So Book of Moon's not only... It used to be the most versatile and probably best spell card in a lot of ways in Yu-Gi-Oh! History and on the competitive scene, because it can do so many things for you, both offensively and defensively. And this deck is one of the ones that this card really shines in compared to most other decks in Edison format. So the cards that are most difficult to deal with for this deck include the following: Bottomless Trap Hole, Dimensional Prison, and Karma Cut for those who do play it. So those cards are all incredibly powerful against this strategy, because the idea is simply to remove the fortresses out of the graveyard, and then you can't recur them, right? So like that's the most powerful part of this deck, is the recursion of the fortress, right? So these cards protect you against Dimensional Prison and Mirror Force, and Mirror Force doesn't remove it, but it's a card that's good against it. And it protects you from those cards, right? And then it books them face down. So, like, what are you going to have to do to deal with it? Most likely, if you're your opponent, you're probably going to have to run it over. And if you run it over, obviously you get the effect to destroy a monster or a card on your opponent's field. So, Book of Moon protects you from those cards, and that's why it's so critical, I think, to play 3 in this particular deck, as compared to others where you can maybe play 1 or 2 and it's fine. It just kind of depends on how your deck plays. But this deck really takes full advantage of it. It's almost like a Forbidden Lance for it as well, as a Book of Moon. And then Creature Swap's a card that you don't see a lot, but I think it's actually incredibly powerful, especially with the addition of Plague Spreader in this deck for me. You can make some plays where you summon Fortress in defense, and then you Creature Swap. You give them your guy, and then you're just like, okay, Goyo attack Fortress. And Fortress will trigger its effect, and Goyo will trigger its effect. So you get Fortress back, and you pop a card on their field. But even if you can't do it with Goyo, it's just really solid. you know, taking a monster from them and then giving them a monster that's going to be a detriment to them is just an incredible combination that makes this card really solid. Now, it's not a card I'd play a bunch of, but I think a 1 of is a really solid amount. And then let's go into the trap cards. Fiendish Chain. I think this card's solid. It answers cards like Dark Arm Dragon, which is pretty enormous in the format. It's one of the few cards that can really answer that card. Also, this deck is kind of more worried about monster effects than it is necessarily the bodies of the monsters that are in play, if that makes sense. So you're not going to see Dimensional Prison in this list. It's going to be not in the main deck. And a lot of times you just want your opponent to be able to attack. So we wanted something a little bit more flexible that was able to answer certain things. And Fiendish Chain's kind of the one that came up. It came out in absolute power force during this time period. And then I got a bunch of 1-ofs. So the limited card Mirror Force, the limited card Mind Crush, Starlight Road, the limited card Solemn Judgment, the limited card Trap Dust Shoot, followed by the 2 limited cards Torrential Tribute and Call of the Haunted. So some people omit Call of the Haunted from this deck. I think it's wrong. It's another way to get Fortress, right? So we got 4 quote-unquote reborns in this deck. Starlight Road's a solid card. You book more of them. But like these cards are kind of... I'm not a humongous fan of Trap Dust Shoot. I understand how powerful it is. But it also is one of those things where Trap Dust Shoot can be a volatile card because you can draw it later and not be great. And these games do have several turns involved in it, right? So I don't typically play it. But in this type of deck, where Fortress's effect, where when it's targeted by a monster effect, you can rip a card out of your opponent's hand, it just goes hand in hand with these cards very well. If you have more opportunities to peek at your opponent's hand, it makes cards like Mind Crush stronger and cards like Trap Dust Shoot stronger, because you could really tear apart someone's hand pretty easily. And so for me, as I played more, I realized that these cards just work specifically additionally well compared to how solid they are individually with the way this deck plays. So Mind Crush and Trap Dust Shoot, I think, are the correct way of going about it. And then let's go to the extra deck. You know, you don't do a lot of extra deck stuff, but you can now with the way that it plays. Probably my most summoned one is, you know, the Debris for Card Trooper, milling 3 and doing the thing. But play Armory Arm, Ally of Justice Cataster, Bryonic Dragon on the Ice Barrier, Iron Chain Dragon. It's a card that you can make with Debris Dragon, because you have to make a dragon. Goyo Guardian, Black Rose Dragon, 2 copies of Stardust since we play Starlight Road, Dark End Dragon because Plague Spreader, and then Thought Ruler Archfiend, Colossal Fighter, Red Dragon Archfiend, and then 3 copies of Chimera Tech Fortress. So I mean, you play Call of the Haunted, so technically it can happen 3 times. I mean, listen, the extra deck in this is, you can pretty much do what you want. You're not going to summon that many of them. You need the few highlight cards, and then after that, it's not that important. But we also build side decks for all of our Edison decks when we play test and have ourselves a good time. So let's go into the side deck. So play 2 copies of DD Crow, 2 copies of DD Warrior Lady. These cards are really good. This card's particularly good in the mirror match. 2 Sidra, Starlight Road, 2 Dimensional Prisons. I want this for the mirror. I don't really want it for a lot of other things, though. Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, just solid as a whole against a variety of different things. So, yeah, doesn't really affect us. You could also play Light Mirror. Really good against Value Turbo, for example. Pulling the Rug, one of the better side deck cards in this format. You know, answers Caius, Deep Sea Diva, etc., etc. And then Double Dust Tornado help deal with those pesky spell and trap cards. So, Roll Oppression's really good against you. Who knew getting 2 for 1 by Oppression would be good? But yeah, that's the deck profile, and I think it's pretty solid. So I would rate this deck a solid B in the format. You know, there's a lot of really good decks in Edison, and I think this kind of goes into that category for sure. All right, guys, thank you.